Hey, what's up? Welcome to the AV Club podcast. I'm your host, AV Club. My guest today is Ryan Cavinder. Ryan Cavinder is the new lead pastor at Awaken Church in Round Rock, Texas, just down the road from here. He is a fitness enthusiast. This man runs multiple miles on a daily basis, all before his kids even wake up. So he's out in the streets running at like 4:30 a.m., 5 o'clock in the morning. And he probably finishes his runs before you guys even can think about snoozing that alarm of yours. That's how good he is. He does all this while balancing a full-time job at a nonprofit organization that helps millions of people globally. He's got a family of his own, and also he leads a church. This guy's got a lot on his plate, but he's got a lot of knowledge and wisdom to help him along with his journey. And I really enjoyed this conversation we had today. I know you guys will enjoy this one, and I am super honored to be able to share this experience with you guys, because this is one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he's a great leader and a great role model. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and let's jump right in it. Thanks. We're rolling.
Sweet.
And just like that, we are on our way. But yeah, we were talking about this merch. So I work at the YMCA. Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
YMCA. I do the print shop stuff in the back. And the boss, she has this little machine. It's called like a Cricut. And essentially what it does is it cuts out like your designs on your vinyl paper. And so you got to do is peel it, and then you put it down and you press it. And she hadn't messed with it at all. And I had never seen one or messed with one. I've seen one, but I've never messed with any. And so she was like, here, set this up, learn it, figure it out. And so I was just practicing, and I was like, well, why not do like my logo and try to just mess around with it. And so it's like a little sloppy, you can see, but it was like a rough cut.
It looks great, man.
There's a lot of stuff to it. But yeah, I made it like one shirt, and I was kind of pumped about it, but I'm like, it's got sparkles on it. Like it was the only paper we had. And so
It's that first edition, man. It's a collector's item.
Yeah, it is, man. I was thinking about giving it to my sister. So
Nice.
We'll see. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Excited to be here.
What time did you get up, and how many miles did you run today?
Actually, this is probably the worst day you could ask that, because I slept in, man.
What is sleeping in to you?
It's probably like 6:45 in the morning.
Wow.
I've got the two little kids, so I got to wake up. But just man, it's been a long recovery process after the last marathon. So just trying to listen to my body and get the rest when I need it.
That's probably the hardest thing to do, right? Sometimes that's even harder than like running 20 miles.
For sure.
Is listening to your body when you need to rest.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that. It's hard. It's just a mental thing with me, because I used to be in high school. I used to be kind of chubby.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. I was a chubby guy in high school, and even though I played sports, I just was never like super fit. I didn't have very much muscle on me, and so once I kind of got rolling in my fitness journey, it was like nonstop and like kind of get addicted to it, especially when you like see the weight loss or like the weight changing and like your body building up. And so like that's a mentality that's kind of always stuck with me, and like sometimes it's not good, sometimes it can be detrimental.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel it whenever I don't run. Like it's mentally, like your body like needs it, right? Physiologically. But then like, if you allow it to like affect you mentally or spiritually, then that's a challenge.
What is your normal routine when you're like, let's say you're training for a marathon? What do you do?
Yeah. So when I'm like heavy into marathon training, I'm probably running like 85 miles a week. So that's probably anywhere between like 10 to 14 miles on like your normal weekday, and then, a long run on the weekend. And so, it's up early, man. I always try to be back before the kiddos are awake. And so really it's just focusing on my body, man. So getting up early to run and focusing on recovery throughout the day. Yeah. I mean, it ends up feeling like a full-time job, just the amount of like attention you have to focus on your body. Yeah.
You got Daniel on some of those, I don't know what it's called, goo or something like that. Some sort of like gel.
Yeah.
Electrolyte stuff.
Yeah.
He let me try one. It was pretty cool.
Was he using that Morton stuff?
Morton, that's what it is. Yeah. Morton, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. There's just so much science to it, right? Like everybody thinks like you just need, a pair of running shoes. And like, it's true to an extent, but like once you start doing some serious mileage or wanting to go faster, like you really have to pay attention to what you're putting in your body, man. And that's really for me has been, especially the last like couple of years, has been the focus, and it's paid dividends, right?
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I love the fact that you get up at such an early time. What time do you normally start your day if you were training for a marathon?
It depends, how many miles I'm running. I try to be done with my run by probably 6:30 or so. So if I'm doing 20 plus miles, I'm starting that run probably around 4 o'clock in the morning or something.
Yeah, I like to tell this story to people when they ask like about either fitness or especially in the church, right? Somehow fitness will get brought up or running or something. And at the beginning of this year, we had like a promotional thing with this gym called True Fusion Fitness down in South Austin. And so we would do it in the morning, like early. I don't know why we would do it in the morning so early, but we would do it in the morning like really, really early. We'd probably get there at 6, and that's an hour drive from us. So, we'd be leaving by 5. Sometimes we'd get, 6 or 7 is when we'd get there. Got to leave an hour at least early. And one time we left at like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., something like that. And we saw you running on Grimes. And we were like, we know where you live. So I was like, whoa, dude, he's far from his house already. And like, we just got up to like, we get up, we like brush our teeth, get ready. And then we're out the door. Like there's no stretching or anything like usually. Cause it's like, get as much sleep as you can and milk that time before you have to actually get it on the road. But
there's something about starting your day that way though. You know what I mean? Like I think for me, especially with 2 young kids and working a couple of jobs, like getting out on the road when there's nobody out there. Sometimes I'll run straight down the middle of the road because there's no cars on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
You know what I mean? It's so peaceful. It's just time to like, just, I don't know, check out, reflect, whatever I need to do, pray. And then, man, by the time you get home, shower up, world's just waking up and you've already run, a dozen miles or something like that. It's just a great way to start the day.
It is. I love waking up early. It's just so hard. It's so hard when you go to bed late. And I find myself in this constant cycle of going to bed. Like, I'm like, all right, today I'll go to bed at, 11:30, which is early for me. And I'm like, man, like I got all my stuff done. Now I just have to get in bed. Yeah. And then it's next thing you know, it's 12 o'clock, 12:30. And I'm like, I'm still sitting in this chair. I'm like, what am I doing? Yeah. And then it just, I pay for it in the morning. Big time, man.
For sure.
What got you into running? Because I know we briefly talked about it like a couple, like 2 weeks ago or last meeting we had or something like that. But
like you, I played sports in high school, played baseball all the way through, and you don't run a lot in baseball. So got into some bad habits, put on some weight. I was probably about 55 pounds heavier in high school than I am now. Yeah. And so in college, just found running, ended up going with a buddy for like, I don't know, felt like forever. It was probably like a mile. But realized, hey man, when you do this with somebody else, it's kind of enjoyable. And I don't know, just kind of started from there, kind of started to go a little bit farther, a little bit longer, and kind of caught the bug, like started to see some of the weight drop off and see the impact it was having mentally and physically. And, I have a pretty addictive and obsessive personality. And so once I start something, like I want to go full in.
Right. Yeah.
And so, eventually ran that first half marathon, then the first marathon, and first ultra marathon, and then kind of just snowballed from there.
Do you remember your first marathon time?
First marathon time, I think it was like 3:50 or something like that.
That's so good. Whenever we were training, the goal was 4. Yeah. The goal was to hit 4. Yeah. And obviously I didn't run it because it got canceled, and then Daniel ran it. I think he got a little bit, like 4 minutes over this time that he wanted. Yeah. But 3:50 that's pretty nuts.
Honestly, man, the first half, like, people always say pace yourself. Like I did not pace myself. And so like the first half was probably like an hour and a half. Like I went blazing out or something like that. And then the second half was just absolutely brutal. And so I'm surprised I even ran again after that, because the second half of that race, it was out in Arizona and it was hot and it was brutal, man. So I learned a lot of lessons and have run a bunch more marathons after that. But it's always I think you learn a lot that first time out.
Yeah, a ton, man. I've learned so much over that period where I was training. It opened my mind up. First of all, it strengthened my mind, right? Because when you're running, even 6 is a lot of miles. 6 miles is a lot to like probably most people. But when you're doing this marathon training, you get to the point where 6 is like, okay, like a cool down day, right? And so you're cruising on 6. And at first it's like, I got to run 6 miles. I remember feeling that. I remember like my body was just in pain afterwards. But then I'm like, I did it. And I was like, I could do it again if I needed to. Yeah. It just snowballs. Like your mental just grows and gets so much stronger over like pushing yourself. Because I think at that point, like we for sure weren't training right. Now looking back, like we were not. we had our buddy Adrian, who's like very into the endurance sports. kind of train us, kind of teach us. And, we would have like, the longest run we would do during the week would be like 3 or 4. And then we'd run like 6 on the weekend. And I'm like, that's a 2-mile jump, dude. That's nuts. But
it's just so mental, man. Like that's the only thing. Like I've helped people train, all ages, shapes, sizes and stuff. And it's like, you go out there, you've seen it, half marathons and marathons, people that like don't look like they should be able to be doing what they're doing. Like it's just because they've figured out that mental battle, right? How to beat that mental game. And man, once you can do that, the sky's the limit, honestly. Like no matter who you are,
Yeah. The sky is the limit. That's true, man. What's the most you've ever ran in a race, in ultras?
So the most miles.
Most miles,
So I had a DNF, so did not finish a 100-mile race, and I ended up calling it quits after 68 miles.
68 miles. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Where was that one at?
That was out north of Houston. It's a trail race.
Oh, gross.
Yeah. So the longest one that I finished was Comrades Marathon in South Africa. That was 54 miles.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
How do you train for that just like anything else? Like you just slowly increase and then have that long run?
It's more so about doing like back-to-back long runs. That's the key. So like during the week stuff looks pretty much the same, but then like I'd be doing like, marathons on back-to-back days, like Saturday, Sunday, multiple times throughout that training cycle. It's about just getting used to running on tired legs.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you get to the back half of that race, you're not running the whole thing, and you're certainly not running it fast. And so just getting used to what it feels like to run on those tired legs.
Yeah. What do you have like an idea of what like a good pace is for a run like that to maintain, or I guess to finish at?
It depends on who you are.
Person, yeah.
Comrades is famously pretty hilly race, and so the terrain, makes a difference too. And so, Comrades is a cool race though, man. Like you got to look this up. It's unbelievable race. It's got a 12-hour time limit. There's like 25,000 people run this race, which any other ultra marathon is like maybe 1,000 people or whatever. This is the world's largest ultra marathon, and it's 12-hour time limit, and that's like a hard cutoff. So they'll literally like at the finish line, if you're like about to cross and it hits like 12 hours on the dot, they shoot a gun off and they will literally like have like security like guard that finish line. Like you don't get to finish.
Whoa.
It's the most like dramatic moment in sports, bro. Like I honestly like I had finished, well ahead of that, but I was watching people finish and you see them coming in with like, 30 seconds to go or whatever. And they're just like crawling towards the finish line. It's the most like agonizing thing. Cause then you see the people that just miss it by like, we're talking 100 feet or less. You know what I mean?
Whoa.
Who have gone 54 miles to come up like 100 feet short. They don't get a medal. They don't get a official finish time. They went like literally the whole way. It's heartbreaking.
That's gnarly, man.
Heartbreaking. And then you see some of them who still like, they're coming in, gun went off 5 minutes ago and they're running hard. They're like, you know what, I'm going to finish the distance. They may not get that medal. So like, it's just one of the most unbelievable moments I've seen like in all of sports, man. That's brutal. That finish line at Comrades is
What'd you finish that one in?
It's about 9 hours and 40 minutes, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane, man.
Yeah.
54?
54 miles, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the original marathon was invented in Greece, right? Or it's
yeah, at least that's the legend, right? Like something about the dude ran to the city of Marathon, which was like 25 miles, give news about some battle or something, and
then he died, right?
He died, yeah. So then somebody thought it was a good idea to follow in his footsteps, and eventually people stopped dying. But yeah, and then at some point they increased it to 26.2, and whenever they did that, and anytime I run past 25 miles at that marathon, I'm like, man, why'd they have to add on that 1.2? Because that last 1.2 is rough.
I can only imagine, man. I can only imagine. I only got to 20, and that was rough.
Yeah, you got to go run that marathon, man.
Yeah.
You got to 20. You basically did. You got to
know, man. It's just, you know what I got to do is just maintain the cross training in it.
Yeah.
If I did that, then that would definitely help at least my mental and then my physical.
Yeah.
Because I just was so weak at 6-7 months of training with no weightlifting at all, like just destroyed me. And then obviously you have times where you're like at highs, you're like, man, I can't wait to run this thing. And then you're like, man, why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. I should have a kettlebell in my hand or something. That's crazy. That's how I thought about it, at least. But yeah, man. How old are your children again?
So Caleb is 6 and Avery's 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that experience having a family and kids, man?
Man, I love those kids so much. Like, we're so blessed.
Yeah.
They're such good kids, but honestly, it's a trip, man. It's like, kind of learning the fly the plane as you're learning to fly the plane as you build it, or however you want to say that. Like, ultimately, like, yeah, I saw my parents, parent me, but ultimately it's like, okay, how do we do this? And so Lindsay and I are always like trying to have side conversations about, okay, what should we do in this situation? Like, every situation, especially with Caleb, who's like 6 and he's in kindergarten now, it's like, it's a new thing for us. So he'll respond in a certain way, and it's like, man, I don't know how to respond to that. And so obviously we always try to go back to scripture and to the examples that have set before us, but man, it's a trip learning how to parent.
That it's crazy to think about, man. I'm definitely not ready for that yet, but it's cool though. I love kids, and your kids are adorable, man. They're so freaking adorable. It's so funny to watch Caleb sometimes in church. Like, I'll just be looking around, and then he's sitting in the front row with you guys sometimes, and he's like doing his own thing, and then sometimes he's like, actually singing and moving along. It's just crazy to see these like little kids, how they're so young and so inexperienced, and how they just, it's a new experience for them in these certain situations, and you get to witness that, like, every time, especially you up close and personally. Yeah. That's amazing.
It's humbling, man, just to see him. I was a pastor's kid, and so like I was in his shoes essentially. And,
right.
To see him worshiping the way he does, to hear his heart for Jesus in the way that we get to, like, man, like, that's nothing but God, can do that. Like, we try to do our best, but ultimately, like, I look at that and I'm like, man, we're so blessed to have such a strong kid, such a heart for others and stuff. And so, man, it's awesome. But man, with parenting, with running, with church, I mean, it's all about just trying to be faithful with what God's given us, and trying to be as disciplined as possible. But ultimately, like, with all those things, it's like, you just got to get out there, like, got to get your feet moving when it's running. You got to just like be intentional with the kids, like, just about being disciplined. There's the parallels between those three like areas of my life it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I actually just listened to a podcast. Actually, you ever heard of BPN supplements?
I don't think so.
It's Bear Performance Nutrition.
Okay.
And they're local. They're out of Round Rock. They're like right behind, or right on Sunset, I think is what it is.
Okay.
Sunset, by like where Taco Bell is and stuff like that over here in Round Rock.
Yeah.
And anyways, this guy is like, was asked questions by like some of the people who follow him on Instagram. And one of the questions was, do you think hard work and discipline are all it takes to be successful? And then he just said basically exactly what you said. It's like, it's the intention behind what you're doing, and like, because you can work hard, but you can also be working hard at the wrong things.
Yeah.
You can be disciplined in the wrong aspects, but if you're intentional in what you do, and and you're focused on that certain goal or that certain task, then it's more meaningful, and you won't really succeed without that intention, because it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing it for? Who are you doing it for?
Yeah, what's that ultimate goal? What's that destination?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's crazy that you bring that up. I just last night I listened to that, so it sparked a little memory bank. But how do you balance raising your kid, as you being a pastor? How do you balance that without trying to like burn them out? Because you hear a lot of stories about like the pastor's kid,
for sure,
and they stray far away from the church usually, in those situations, or they're a little crazy, a little rowdy. But is that something you've considered yet? Or like, is that something that you're trying to focus on and like not like push them too hard, but like, how does that balance work for you guys?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, that's part of my story, right? I grew up in church. My whole family worked at the church. I went to school there. I was there 7 days a week.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And so, I did the typical kind of pastor's kid thing, right? I rebelled in parts of high school and definitely in college. And so, ultimately, I think for me, it's a couple things. It's realizing that, Caleb and Avery are their own people, and not putting pressure on them to be anything that they're not. I definitely rely on Lindsay a lot too. I think sometimes I can be maybe a little bit, too aware of what happened to me, and maybe even project things onto them, like not wanting them to rebel or do these things. And so Lindsay helps me kind of keep an even balance. But ultimately, I think it's just not putting pressure on these kids. I mean, kids in general these days, like, I have so much pressure on them at school and with, social media, all those sorts of things. And so I think it's just being present with them, man, and, let them know there's no pressure for them to be a certain way. Like, Caleb doesn't need to become a pastor. I want him to be his own person. And so even when it comes to like, he loves coming with me to set up and tear down at church. And so, I leave that up to him every time. Like, he wants to still, but like, I'm never going to force him to do that. You know?
That's cool. That's really neat. Hey, just real quick, can you turn the mic like a little angled?
This way.
The other way. Yeah. And then push it to your right a little bit, just so it's not directly in your, you know what I mean? There you go. That's perfect. Sorry. Does that make your arms awkward? You can move it if you need to. Okay, cool. Sorry about that.
No, it's good.
I'm the cameraman, I'm the producer, I'm the host, so I try to make it easy on myself later.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man, because, I know that because I'm Catholic, Catholic is what I grew up in and raised in. And so in the Catholic faith, a lot of the times you find that kids are being forced to go to church. They're being forced to do the things that they find are boring or find not fun. And that's, in my opinion, why they lead astray a lot of the time, And that's any church really, but that's my experience was in the Catholic Church. And so I have like a, very intimate and personal relationship with that one. But yeah, and so being forced into anything is not necessarily a good thing, I don't think, because then it in my personal opinion, it leads, it inclines you more to leave the whatever you're doing, no matter if it's like sports, for example. Like if you're being pushed like super hard to do sports and you don't have a passion for it yet, or you haven't developed it, but you're being forced to go play, 4 hours after school and then wake up early and practice, like all the time it's being forced upon you.
Yeah.
It's easier for you to be like, I don't want to do this. This isn't what I like. I'm not having fun,
Yeah. God's given us, desires. He's given us an identity, and it's pretty rare when like parents or the church can like hit that nail on the head. You know what I mean? Like even if their intentions are good, like I loved playing baseball growing up, but like I knew that wasn't me. That's not what I wanted to do. And so like to continue to force me to play, and my parents never did that, but if they did, it's like, that's ultimately not what I want. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's just as low pressure as we can put on Caleb, as much as we can speak into his identity and give him the freedom to be who he wants to be. Man, I think that's where it needs to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I love that answer, man. And of course it's some insight for me in the future whenever I have kids, or if I have kids, that's a good perspective, and it's also good like leadership for you, not even just to your son, to others. So hopefully whoever hears this will take that advice,
Yeah.
So how was that for you growing up as a pastor's kid? Were you kind of like, dragged along for the ride and got a bad taste in your mouth because of it?
No. It's interesting. I think the environment that I grew up in, the church where my parents worked, didn't really align with the type of faith, the type of relationship that I wanted to have with Jesus. And the church did a lot of good. A lot of people came to the Lord, but there was just something that just sat differently with me. But nevertheless, obviously, it's where my parents were working. It's where I went to school, and so it was where I went to church and tried to honor them in that. But it was a unique place to grow up, man, especially with parents that worked there and being there all the time. Like people saw me a certain way. I felt like I needed to act a certain way.
Right.
And so naturally, you get out from under that microscope, if you will. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, who am I?
Right.
You're not hanging around the right people, or if you put yourself in the wrong situation, you go searching for your identity in the wrong places, which, was the case for me. And so, ran from it for a little while. By the grace of God, he brought me back, didn't let me go too far off.
He lasted you back in, man.
Yeah, man, no, for sure. And so that's where I'm super grateful that I did grow up in church, because I had that foundation. I knew what I was doing, when I went away to college or whatever, I knew it was wrong. And so I had enough of a spiritual foundation to know that's not who I was. I mean, I don't know who exactly I was, but I knew that wasn't it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. And so now, I'm just more intimately aware of kind of where Caleb's mind's going to be at as he gets older.
Right.
And just want to shepherd that well. But, my parents did a great job, man. I think they put me in the right spot. Ultimately, I think, it was on me to figure out what my identity was.
Right.
And it wasn't until college that I really even heard, this reference to like a personal relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
Where I've heard that I had like my own identity in Jesus, that I didn't have to have like my parents' identity, right? That I wasn't just like part of like a family identity, like that I had a personal identity, personal relationship with Jesus, and that changed everything.
That's huge. And a lot of people don't know that, which is, and fortunate for you, you were able to find that, right? But some people aren't. Yeah. And, a little bit about my background in that is that like my dad is Catholic, his whole family's Catholic, and my mom was non-denominational, like that's the kind of church she would always attend. And I think he's my great grandpa. We just call him grandpa, but he had his own church for a while. And so, she kind of grew up in there, and when they got married and stuff, it went more the Catholic route, which was cool. Like, I loved growing up in the Catholic church, and I've had no bad experiences with it at all. Unfortunately, others have, but that wasn't me. And so, growing up with my mom being in the non-denominational side and my dad being on the Catholic side, I kind of got the best of both worlds. And so I have a unique perspective in that I know the prayers that are written, right? I know I have these memorized prayers that are written from the Bible or said from these saints or these whoever, right? But I also know that like the personal relationship is just as important, if not more important, because like that's how you get to know God, and that's how you grow in your faith, right? Because like I was lucky enough to go to both churches, and so I knew when because my mom was like the prayer sayer in the family, and so she would say these prayers that weren't like Our Father, like straight scripted prayers, quote unquote, right? She would say what was on her heart, what she like wanted to be prayed for, what she asked for. And so it was very specific. And I was like, oh, that's, different. So that's kind of how we grew up praying. And then we have this perspective. I say we as in me and my brother and my sister. We have this perspective of like both. Like we know the benefits of both sides. And so a lot of people, I would say, in the Catholic faith don't necessarily know that one-on-one personal connection. Yeah. Because it's not really taught. It's very like, I told this to, I think it was Ben or someone the other day, but I was like, it's like 7th day of school or a 6th day of school. You get Saturday off, then you got to go to Sunday school on Sundays. And so it's just crazy the difference in how Awaken has been for me compared to how all the other churches has been to me. But like I said, again, I've never had a bad experience in either.
What do you feel like has changed your relationship with Jesus in terms of like actually diving into like a more like Protestant non-denominational church?
Yeah. Probably the aspect of community, which is like, I know that's what Awakens kind of tries to hit and tries to nail in, is the community aspect of it. Growing up in church, we would just get in our pew and it was very quiet most of the time, right? You say your prayers, everybody says them out loud, but then you don't really get to talk. You get to sing, but it's like not songs that like, they're not songs people want to sing. They're like, very traditional type songs. And at Awaken, you get to sing with like your heart. And my mom has always kind of talked about that. It's like, how's the worship at the church? How's the worship at the church? And that's because it's a huge thing. Like I've never realized that in the past, how big that was. But the worship and the community are probably the biggest things at Awaken, which that book we read was like huge on both of those things. And you just feel closer to people. Like let's say, I'm going to name drop here, but Rich who goes to our church. If I wouldn't have joined this group, if I wouldn't have like reached out, or if the church wouldn't be as open about like community as it is, I probably would not even know Rich's name, like just the fact that I wouldn't have gone up to talk to him, or if I did, it would have been like hey, what's up, man? Like, and then that would have been it. But like now I'm like, I know Rich, we're like friends. He's like way older than me, but like we're friends. And same with a lot of the other guys that are attending the church. And that aspect of it is cool because, we used to just go to church and then you go get donuts and coffee. You'd probably sit with your family and then you'd leave. That was it.
Yeah, man, it's the relationship is huge. And it's funny, as you're talking, I'm thinking about like the parallels to running, right? Like I told you, like running really wasn't fun for me until I did it with somebody else, right? And then I didn't start to get faster or go farther until I started running with guys who ran faster or farther than me, right? And so like this idea of us like growing in our faith, like that's where that personal relationship, not just with Jesus, is just a given, but like with others is so important. And guys like Rich or Don or Keith, guys who've like gone before us, maybe a few years older than us, where that's so important to know, like, hey, they've got teenagers, right? I can learn from them. Or you're looking at me like, hey, he's got a couple kids, like I can learn from him. And like that's what gets us to go farther, gets us to go faster. I would have never been running the times I'm running now if I didn't start running with this group that I'm running with.
Right.
You know what I mean? Same thing as us hanging out and being a part of this men's group that we do at church. It's like, you know, that's how we get better. Like, yeah, we look to Jesus, but like, it's also important to have like real life practical examples around you of guys who can like show you how it's done.
Right. Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. Which is huge, you know? And that reminds me of my dad. Bringing me back to my dad is my dad learned all these skills like growing up from obviously just jumping in with no prior experience or knowledge, and learning it. But he's also learned a ton from his brothers. He's got like 6 or 7 brothers, and they're all older than him, or most of them are older than him, right? I think he's like the second youngest. And so they've passed down all this knowledge to him because they work with him and they, you know, they're close. And like I'm talking, my dad can fix a car. He can fix plumbing. He can probably build a house. No, he did build a house. He built like a full shed in our backyard.
Nice.
I went to college, you know, as you do when you're in college, and I came back like a couple months later. He built like a whole like shed that looked like a little house in our backyard. I was like, did you buy this or make this? And he's like, no, I made it. And I was like, what? I didn't know you could do that. You know, like random stuff. Anyways, the point is like he learned all this stuff from his brothers, being around them and being involved and them teaching, like just like you had said, like with the church. So
that's discipleship, man.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Like it's like us imparting the wisdom that God's given us and the experience onto somebody else and helping them grow. Like that's discipleship 101, man. That's what I love this group, man. I think it's probably the most solid group, most like multi-generational, multi-ethnic group that we've had. This men's group, you know what I mean? And it's just cool to see the other guys discipling each other too. Like it's been awesome. It
has been awesome, man. I've really enjoyed that. And it's been a goal of mine to start reading. And this is like, I think I told you at the beginning, I was like, yeah, I didn't want to join this men's group. So by that feeling I got, I knew that I probably should join. Yeah. And then it also helped me with readings. It's like double win. But
so good.
I have a question for you, man. Do people call you Pastor Ryan just in the streets? Like they're like, hey, Pastor Ryan. Do they just call you that all the time?
It depends on who it is. We actually had some of the gals from church over last night helping Lindsay out, getting ready for this women's event this weekend. And some of them walk in and go, "Hi, Pastor Ryan." I'm like, you don't have to call me that. Like I appreciate the respect and all of that, but at the same time, like, you know, I want to be, you know, their friend as well.
Right.
Especially when they're coming into my home. And so I'm fine with either. I'm still getting used to being called that again, especially growing up as a pastor's kid. Like I always saw myself as the pastor's kid, not the pastor, but honestly, it's like one of my life's greatest honors to pastor this church, man. And so it's not a prideful thing, but there's a joy in my heart when somebody calls me that, because it reminds me of what God's called me to and the responsibility he's given me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's crazy. I think I'm going to have to start, I'm going to start having people call me video Aaron, videographer Aaron. Just put my title before it. That's funny. No, but I was seriously curious about that, because whenever we're not in church, honestly, I mean, I consider you a friend and you are the pastor of the church. So I just feel like calling you like Ryan is appropriate. And so I wanted to ask you that, because I was like, if you're just at the store or anything and someone's like, "Oh, Pastor Ryan," it's like, does that ever happen to you when you get called out in the middle of a store?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer Ryan, man. Like, it's, I don't ever want you to call me Pastor Ryan. Some people say PR or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, again, to me, it's about the relationship. And so if that's how you grew up, you know, some people it's like that. That's how they grew up. That's how they were raised. Like, hey, that's fine. But I'm never going to ask somebody to call me that, you know? Yeah,
that's funny, man. That's cool though. How do you like it so far, being the lead pastor of the church?
Yeah, man, it's been a journey. I know you've heard a little bit of that story, but God's been so gracious and so faithful, man. I think even just in the way that everything transpired, like I know that's something God called me to like over a decade ago, but he was just super gracious and patient with me, as I think he needed to, you know, to do some work on my heart, probably on my head too, and to get me to this point. And so, you know, hooked up with Ben. I met him about 3 years ago, and then that kind of just started that journey. I don't think either one of us saw it kind of coming to this point, but I think God just directed our path through it, man. And it's been unbelievable. So I think it was November when I stepped into the role, and God's just been so faithful, man, to bring just an incredible team, you know, adding guys like Josiah and Daniel to our, to our staff, but even just the people that have come in the church since we came back from COVID, man, just unbelievable people with a heart for others. It's just been so cool to be a part of, man. Like, I just feel like I don't know. I'm the luckiest guy in the world, man, to get to pastor such incredible people.
So this is like, I'm being genuinely honest right now. It feels really special being in that church. It feels like, I was telling this to Taylor, there's like a momentum that's going on right now in the church, and you can kind of feel it. And I've never said that before about anything. Like, I'm not trying to say it because you're the pastor and you're sitting in front of me. I truly feel this like momentum, this very, very positive momentum that's building in the church. And I don't know what it is or what it's from, or I know it's from the people, obviously, you know, but I don't know. It's awesome, man. Yeah. It's so cool. And I'm like, it's like a super, it's the church is so good in my opinion. And, you know, there's a lot of different things that play into the word good when you're talking about a church, but I like the church so much that I'm like not wanting to miss ever. Yeah. Every time I have the opportunity to go or to do anything, I'm like, I want to jump on it as fast as I can, just because it's, I don't know, it's like fun, you know, it's not like a boring place to be. It's a fun, lively place. And
I'm glad to hear you say that, man. And I think that's been the conversation we've been having too, especially with me and Josiah, is like, it's hard to put your finger on exactly what's going on, but it's like, you know, that God's moving. And I think ultimately to me, man, it's like, I think it's that we have a shared vision, not just like as a staff, but I think all of our people. There's a shared heart for the lost. There's a shared like expectation that God's going to be doing something amazing. And I think ultimately, like, we know God's going to be faithful, and really I think he's in a lot of time just waiting for us to like catch up with that idea and to lean into that and to, you know, I say it all the time, like, man, God, just wreck our plans. You know, if you've got something different for Awaken, let us know what it is. But I feel like he's given us a clear direction, and he's just equipped us with the people. And just, I mean, it's been amazing to see some pretty miraculous things that have happened in terms of who he's brought in terms of the way he's provided for us. I mean, very few churches can say that they've, you know, grown in the midst of COVID and all this sort of stuff. And just the momentum we've seen given the circumstances is pretty rare, man. So again, I don't know exactly where God's, you know, leading us. I think I've got a pretty good idea, but man, it's just fun to be along for the ride.
Very fun to be along for the ride. And going back on the point of the people that have come, like, so Daniel and Josiah, those guys are great, man. They're so funny. And like, sometimes Josiah told me he doesn't listen to podcasts, so he better not listen to this.
we could talk about him now. Yeah, he ain't listening.
He's so goofy, man. It's so funny. I love his like quirkiness, and the cool thing about it is that it's all really focused towards the Lord, which is like, you know, anybody that works for a church with the church, it's like that's what you want to hear, right? Like, you want them to be all about the church, all about God, all about whatever it is. And so he's just embodies that to a T. And then Taylor and I had dinner with Daniel and Lauren. And they're great, man. They're so funny and fun people to be around, and they have some ideas that they kind of shared with us about the next steps that they want to start implementing. And he's like already thinking about all these things, all the media, all the stuff to get the kids in. And it's awesome, man. It's so cool. And they're young adults. They're the people that you want. Not that age is, you know, whatever, but they're like the people that are going to get the job done, I feel.
For sure. Yeah, I think with both of those guys, man, like when we brought them on, I was like, all I saw was just these guys that were in just relentless pursuit of Jesus and just wanted to bring as many people along for the ride as they could, man. So like literally everything we do, I mean, yesterday we're trying to, you know, get our YouTube kind of cleaned up and looking good. And so Daniel's like trying to figure out, okay, how can we be pointing to Jesus from like hashtags to the titles of our messages, all these sorts of things. I mean, like everything that we do, and especially with those guys, it's really about how can we point more people to Jesus in this. And so everything else it just kind of comes from there, right? Like the worship songs, like for Josiah, you know, the set list or whatever, if it's Daniel putting on events, like, hey man, if that's our main goal and for all of that shared vision, that's where that momentum comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And Josiah's a fool, man. He tried to get me to be in the band. He's like, because I mentioned that I played the guitar a little bit, and by no means am I good. Like I know probably 3 or 4 chords, and I could put some of them together sometimes to make like a song that, you know, replicate a song, right? Just play a cover. And he's like, dude, you play instruments? Come join the band. He's like, dude, I shred on the electric. That's my thing. So come play the acoustic in the back. I was like, no way, man. I'm not good. But they got Glenn,
Yeah.
You met Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn is, I don't know very much, but Daniel and them went to school with him.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
he's solid.
yeah. You
Good
should
guy.
get up there and play, man. That's what we've been talking about, right? Like you got to get out there and just give it a shot. You're out there with guys who are going to help train you up, and who knows, man?
Yeah. Maybe I'll have Rich's wife teach me the piano.
There you go.
But
I know you play the keyboard a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. Did you happen to listen to that podcast with Gideon, by the way?
Oh yeah.
Dude, how crazy is that? I'm sure you've heard most of that before, but
Gideon's amazing, man. I'll never forget. I was preaching one day and I was sharing about my work with World Vision. And he comes up to me afterwards and he goes, "Hey," he's like, "I don't know if you knew this. I used to work for World Vision." I was like, "Are you for real?" He's like, "Yeah, helped like drill wells in in Mauritania." I was like, "No way!" And that just unlocked. Yeah, his story is unbelievable, man. Like to have somebody like that who's that passionate, but who has that kind of experience. I mean, I'm so excited for that guy and how the Lord's going to use him.
Yeah, man, he's got so much talent and skill and passion in everything he does. It blows my mind because he gets up there and he just lets it all out. There's like, we were reading that book where it's like release all your arrows.
Yeah,
man, he's got no arrows in his quiver, man. He's letting them all fly.
Yeah.
That's the kind of faith that guy has. It's freaking awesome, and he's just a good guy, and he's funny too.
Yeah.
So it's like just all
that's
right.
why it's fun to be led by guys like him and like Josiah is like, they're giving it everything you got, right?
Yeah.
And when you're trying to follow somebody, especially like in worship where like guys probably like you and I, right, maybe not have the greatest voices, like may not know exactly what we're doing. Like if you're following after somebody who's leading like that, like it's so much easier to like let go of yourself and all whatever hesitations or fears or whatever insecurities you might have and just like give your all to Jesus because you're seeing them do it,
Right. Yeah, man. What is World Vision?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So World Vision is a global humanitarian nonprofit organization. It's actually I think the oldest. So it's a Christian organization. It's actually what brought Lindsay and me and the kids out here to Texas. And so I took a job working originally with churches, like all of our church partners throughout Texas. And so most people know World Vision through like child sponsorship. You sponsor a child for like $39 a month. You write them letters and stuff. But ultimately what World Vision does is trying to just eliminate poverty around the world. And so raising communities up out of poverty, getting them to self-sustainability. Right. World Vision is the number one provider of clean water, non-government provider of clean water throughout the world. So World Vision is in about 100 different countries. I mean, it's a massive organization, about 40,000 people. And so still working with World Vision while doing the lead pastor gig. And so now I'm working with our individual donors, getting to raise funds for these projects, helping communities and kids around the world.
That's insane, man. How do you balance that? Do you work there like full time still while doing the?
Yeah. So doing World Vision full time, and it's kind of a unique role because obviously I'm working from home, traveling all over the state, and so meeting with donors kind of on their time. You're
currently traveling all over the state, like during the week. Is that what you do?
I mean, less right now because of COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah, spend
a
good amount of time in like Houston, Dallas, even get up to Tulsa, to Oklahoma a little bit. Right now it's been kind of nice because you can do a lot of it virtually and over the phone. But yeah, I was just in the Woodlands north of Houston this past weekend. Had a dinner with a group of donors and stuff. And so, man, it's such a blessing. And it's cool too because now that I'm working with individual donors, like getting to really kind of pastor them in a lot of ways. People who trying to figure out how they can give of their resources, primarily financial, to better the kingdom. And so getting to kind of shepherd them through that, seeing how the two roles that I get to serve in overlap has been pretty awesome, man. But yeah, World Vision's an incredible organization. So I pinch myself every morning, man. I get to wake up and I get to help, kids and communities around the world in Jesus' name. And then I get to, be invested into our community, drawing people closer to Jesus as well. Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you ever play the pastor card? Be like, hey, I'm a pastor of the church, and give me some more money. Does that ever?
No. I mean, most of them know that I am a pastor. No, I haven't hit them up. Want to keep those two things separate. But
right.
At the same time, like it's been helpful, because it's opened up opportunities for me to pray for them, and some of them will watch our sermons online, and
that's awesome.
Know that they can lean on me for that. And so it's changed and deepened some of those relationships. So again, it's cool to see kind of where that overlap's been, and how it's just helped those relationships.
That's amazing, man. I couldn't imagine being in two roles like that. That's heavy stuff, man. That's a lot of responsibility in a way, but
it's a lot to juggle sometimes, man. But ultimately, it's having the shared vision of trying to connect people to Jesus or serve
Yeah.
people in Jesus' name. And like for me, it's more so just figuring out, okay, making sure I'm using the right email address and
Right.
you know, keeping things separated as best I can. So.
Yeah. That's very impressive, man. Sometimes I'm like, man, there's not enough time in the day for me to play Call of Duty. So I'm like, I don't know how you juggle all that.
Well, no Call of Duty. That's the start.
Yeah, that's impressive. So how has this lead pastoral role changed your view on the church?
Yeah, it's good. I think I was telling Ben this the other day. I was like, I've seen pastors do it. You know, I was walking with pastors in my role with World Vision. I've been walking with Ben for the last few years. There's just certain things like are going on. You don't really fully understand until you're in that role, until you're sitting with that family when they're hurting, until you're having those difficult conversations with members of your congregation, until you're kind of under that weight, that pressure. There's nothing to mimic it, right? And so I think for me, it's especially growing up with a little bit of church hurt and kind of that church background. I think I found a lot of grace from my own dad, from my own parents, for some pastors that came before me, just realizing, hey, how big of a challenge this is, how difficult it is. And for me, more so, I think than anything, it's trying to figure out, okay, how can I stay healthy, right? You see all the time in the news or whatever, all these pastors either having, moral failures or worse, right? There's some that, not to get too serious here, but like taking their own lives, you know what I mean? Just because the weight and the pressure can be so much. And so I think that's been the ultimate thing for me is, man, how can I stay balanced? Again, especially working a couple of jobs and with the kids and everything else. Yeah. How can I stay healthy in this? That's where, honestly, running plays a big part in that, keeping my mind clear, staying active, those sorts of things. And so I think that's what I've learned most. And honestly, it's expanding my love for people. God's just opened my heart in a lot of ways towards people to have, more empathy for them, to see them the way that Jesus sees them. And I've got a kind of a pastor shepherd type of heart. That's where I try to lead from. And God has just been so faithful to open that up more. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you felt the Lord kind of calling you towards this role 10 years ago. So what changed? Like, why did you decide to all of a sudden, because this is a pretty quick transition, right? You've only been going to Awaken. It's only been a thing for 4 years, right? 4 or 5 years?
Less than that. We'll be 3 years old in September.
3 years. Yeah. So how did that change so quickly? Especially 3 years you weren't a pastor to now you're the lead pastor. How did that change?
That's what's been cool, man, is I think, when I first felt that call in my heart, 10, 12 years ago, I kind of gave God the Heisman, gave him that stiff arm. Yeah. And then even though I was kind of giving him the stiff arm here, he was equipping me in so many ways, man. Like the guys that he brought into my life to mentor me, the churches that we were at, like one of the churches I went to, it's called the Village Church. It's out in Irvine, California. We were living out there. Okay. They basically ran like a mini seminary. We were reading, you think what we're doing now is intense with our group. We were reading like 3-4 books a month or more. Yeah, it was intense. We met every Thursday for like 3 hours. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I basically got, God was just equipping me along the way in ways that like I knew he was probably going to use in some way, but I was still giving him that stiff arm. And then I think really when we moved out to Texas to take that role with World Vision, in my mind that was like, okay, this is God get me out of my comfort zone. This is what he was calling me to. And so I kind of like loosened that stiff arm, but still kind of kept him here knowing that probably wasn't it. And when I met Ben, I knew, and he and I had a conversation real early on, when like Awaken had just started, of like, yeah, I know God's calling me to this. I was like, I don't know what that looks like. And so really for me, ultimately, when it came to last summer, when we first started talking about this transition, I just said, all right, God, like I'm putting my hands down. Like I'm ready for whatever you got for me.
Yeah. That's so wild to think about, just 3 years ago, you were just a normal citizen, which, you still are, but now you're pastoring a bunch of people in a congregation. Yeah. Do you ever feel like extra like burden or extra weight because of that? Is there any extra pressure on you because every Sunday you got to deliver, or?
When I get inside my own head too much. Yeah. Right. But God has an awesome way of reminding me that he doesn't need me for any of this, but he chose me for it, and the fact that he chose me tells me that like, hey, he's gonna fill in the gaps. He calls me to be faithful. Like, I can't just like put in 2 hours of prep work on a message. Right. I still need to be faithful to put in the time, but ultimately it's him who's going to guide those words. I mean, he can change them from the time they leave my mouth to the time they hit your ears, you know, the impact that they're going to have. Like, and so all he calls me to do is to be faithful. And so it's moments, you know, especially like Sunday mornings when I'm doing the final prep for the message, where I realize like, all right, God, like, I'm trusting you gave me the right words, but if you didn't, I'm trusting that you're going to change them, or that they're going to hit people the way that they need to hit. And when I realize that, all the burden's gone, man. And then I just get pumped to bring the message, or to, you know, to do whatever I'm doing. And so, if I get myself out of the way, then there's no burden. And I know when I'm in my own way, when I'm feeling that weight and I'm feeling that pressure.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And that resonates to me in a lot of ways, like, especially when you're not feeling confident about a certain thing that you know you can do, or you know you're skilled at. And I'm not saying like, you know, this is a little bit different because your, you know, pastoral role is different from like a job, or like a full-time job, or like let's say I was going to go shoot video, right? Like, I know I can do it. You still get nervous. You still have these, you know, doubts, but once you get out of the way of yourself, it just starts flowing, you know, and it's like not up to you almost at that point, you know. And I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that in some sort of form, but it's a little different when it's, you know, you're talking to people in a congregation. Do you have like a process that you do every time, like a ritual you do before leading up to a sermon on Sunday, or do you kind of just change it up every time?
Like throughout the week? It changes a little bit just because, again, like working the multiple jobs, but I've got kind of an outline I try to use for my sermon prep, but ultimately for me, my favorite time, man, is Sunday mornings. So we used to always do set up and tear down, like all hands on deck, but lately we've actually had whoever's preaching doesn't have to come set up. And so I normally get to the office around 7 a.m. and I'll spend 2 hours there really just in prayer. My prayer always is like, all right, God, if this is what you want your people to hear, then just, hey, continue to just like allow me to really own this and internalize it. I was like, but if you want to change it, if any of these words are from me and not from you, tell me now and I'll change it. That actually happened this past Sunday. Is I got there, I prayed that prayer as I always do. I should probably start praying it earlier in the week, but I prayed that and really felt God leading me to end the message in a different direction. And so I spent that time doing that. But that's become one of my favorite moments of the week, is just that still quiet time to hear from God. I think he just, I don't know, just the Holy Spirit just ministers to me in a unique way on those Sunday mornings before I bring the word. And so I always end up leaving there, getting to church at 9:30, just feeling pumped up and ready to go. That was a
you weren't planning to say that at the end, or that wasn't kind of something you were
I was planning to go in a different direction. And honestly, like I had felt, if I'm being honest, like the couple of days beforehand, I was like, I don't know that this is the right direction to go. And then Sunday morning, I think God just kind of revealed a couple things to me of kind of, I think, where it needed to end up. And it's not the first time he's done that, but, I think it's just needing to be open to the way he's moving, and what he wants to say through me, and not just be so rigid about, well, these are the words that I wrote, this is what I plan to say. And sometimes that happens even while I'm up there, I'll hear something from the Holy Spirit and realize I need to, go a different direction. Sometimes I'll do that on the fly.
Yeah. Sorry, it just cut out a little bit, but
that's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. That's awesome, man. Because that was the bracelet talk, right? That's when you Sunday? Yeah. That was a really good one.
Yeah.
I sent it to my family. I'm not sure if they watched, but it was a really good one. I think you hit the nail right on the head with that one, or God did,
Yeah.
And I think that message was, because it had a little bit to do with like political views, right? Like a little bit to do with that, but not in terms of like which side you're on, in terms of how to deal with either side, right? That's the kind of what I got from it.
Yeah.
Almost like you're not right on the right side or the left side, but you got to love everybody, anybody.
Yeah, it's where's your heart at, right?
Right.
Like Jesus would have been, probably conservative in some ways and liberal in other ways, but ultimately, like, love is what drove him to care for people. Yeah.
And that brand is really cool. I actually, before you even, I have a hoodie of theirs, and I've had it for months. Back when I was in Marble Falls, I had that hoodie and came with the bracelet, and I was like, man, what a cool brand! Like, what a cool brand to just, I don't know, show the love of God and explain it, like, I love it. It's like, what would Jesus do? It's like the brand is literally the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And that is so cool. And you get asked on it a lot when you just have because the hoodie I have, it just says, I think, HWLF.
Yeah.
And so you get asked about it, and I'm like, oh, it means he would love first. And it's the answer to the question, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, it's just a good reminder, like, duh, he would love first, and we forget that all the time.
Yeah. Well, I love that it's the answer to the question. And it's not, because, I remember when I was little, I'd wear the WWJD bracelet, but like you leave that open up to your own interpretation, right? It's like, well, I think Jesus would do this. And it's like, well, where's that in scripture? Yeah. Ultimately, like the best, most appropriate answer is that he would love first. Yeah. You know what I mean? So don't leave it up to your own interpretation. Like, look at what scripture says.
Daniel Villarreal was saying that he gets, he orders stuff from them a lot. He loves their brand. And he said that, they kind of have like a little friendship with the people up there, and they'll send them some shirts every now and then, or like they'll throw extra shirts in their order.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
That's awesome.
It's cool though that a young person started that brand, and it's like, how wise is that? Like how like true is that, and it's like, it doesn't have to be somebody who's had years of experience with, faith or even, marketing or branding, whatever. Like this guy was like, thought about it, was probably called to make that the name of their brand, and they're probably helping a bunch of people out, helping a bunch of people remember what to do in certain situations.
That's the thing about our faith though, man, right? Is it's so countercultural, counterintuitive to everything. I mean, we saw a few weeks ago, we had little Charlie Smith, right? 6-year-old getting baptized. And that led to one of the guys in our congregation, I think he'd be okay with me saying, like a recovering addict, like step up and say, hey, you know what? Like that inspired me. I want to change my life. I want to be baptized too. And so that was Todd, our buddy that got baptized on Easter Sunday.
Yeah, that was cool.
So it just goes to show you, man, like it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, if you went to seminary and been, wanted to be a pastor your whole life, or if you got kind of thrown into it, later in life like I did. It's like God can use any of us.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's the truth. And that's something my family's always told me growing up, which is super, I'm super blessed and thankful that they did. And I don't know, it's crazy to see. It's funny. It's crazy to see that the stuff that your parents teach you, eventually you incorporate that into your lives. Like sometimes, like whether it's, my dad telling a dumb joke to a waitress at a restaurant, and then me saying that same joke, and then like kind of like hit, like, what did I just do? Or whether it's like, you could do anything if you believe and you have that faith, or, it all comes full circle, man.
Yeah, that's why it's important to be intentional, right, with our relationships and with the way I'm raising my kids, the way I'm, interacting with you. Like, is, we are kind of who we hang around. We are what we believe, and so, man, what are we filling our minds with, right? Is it with the words from the world, or is it, the words of God? And ultimately, I know I pointed to it this last Sunday in the sermon, is like, man, like we've got all the answers, we've got all the wisdom we need. It's right there in the Bible, and yet we're trying to take all this information from everywhere else. That's why for me, like, especially like with raising Caleb, right? He'll ask me something, I'm like, sometimes I'll answer first my own answer, and like, nope, like let's look to scripture. Like what Bible story can I remind him of where this was done well, and not put my own self in there, but like try to point him back to scripture.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That's so cool, man. I'm super fortunate to know you. You're truly one of the nicest guys I've ever met. We have yet to get coffee though and have like a deeper conversation, but we got to set that up. But dude, that was such a great conversation. I don't want to expand it on stuff that, kind of just blabbers. So I tend to do that. But Ryan, thank you for coming, man. That was of course, man. Hour long, but it was packed full of knowledgeable stuff and very useful information. I'm very honored that you came, man. I really appreciate it.
I'm honored to be here, man. I've listened to, I think, every episode, and so it's
Let's go.
I'm humbled to be here, man, in the studio, and so excited to hopefully do it again sometime.
Yeah, man. By the way, I don't know if you heard that. It's weird asking, hey, did you listen to me talk the other day? But I met was looking for a table. Did you hear that kind of story? So I was looking for a table because, as you can see, that one's a little shorter. Yeah. It's a different size. It's way smaller. And Daniel had this other desk that was connected originally, and he took it back because he needed it for his office. And so I was like, man, that sucks. I'm out of a desk. Like, I need a desk. And so I was looking on Facebook Marketplace because that's where we kind of found these. And some guy was in Round Rock. He custom made these. And they're good. They're good. And they were really cheap. They're like $150, which pretty cheap for handcrafted wood, So I found this guy, and he was like, has very reasonable prices in his stuff. And so I hit him up. I was like, hey man, what do you charge for a table? Like, not sure of the dimensions yet, but I know it's for my podcast. Like, what do you got for me? And then he was like, dude, I usually charge like this much, but if you give us like a shout out, like if we can work together on some sort of deal, like we'll figure it out. But anyways, it's custom and it's wood. He's going to make it look like this design that I picked out. He's going to put my logo on it. He's going to put his logo on it because I told him he could, brand himself too. And I just worked out so perfectly, man. And it was like perfect timing, and it'll probably be ready in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I'm freaking pumped for that. I don't have to deal with like a shorter table or like, these are like not super stable. So
you're reaching the influencer status, man. You got to help them sell some tables now. All those AV Club listeners.
Hopefully, man. I don't want to be an influencer, but yeah, it's just cool. It's just super shocking to me and super like, I was just humbled by it because I listen to all these podcasts and then in the middle they're like, hey, brought to you by, XYZ brand. And I'm like, man, that'd be so cool to do this as like, and help people out in the process because not only is he helping me, but I'm helping him hopefully by getting people attention to his stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just super cool and super humbling, and I was pumped, man. I was super pumped when he asked me. So it was cool.
That's cool, man. You're making an impact with what you're doing. I know you say you're not an influencer, but you are, and you're getting people's stories out there, and I think it's having a bigger impact than you realize, man. And so definitely be praying for you as you go along. And excited to watch the journey, bro.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Alrighty.